Hello, this is the third and final part of our pulmonary pharmacology. For this one, I want to give you a heads up. There's going to be a lot of skipping around between the drawings because I'm trying to follow along with the order that we were presented in the PowerPoint. However, some of these drawings are from previous modules, so just bear with me. But we're going to get started with the smoking cessation drugs. So these are right here. We have varenicline or Chantix, and then we have bupropion. So we'll start with Chantix. So we have a guy, he has this megaphone, he is chanting Chantix, and he's saying, quit smoking. And Chantix is a partial nicotine receptor agonist. So this cigarette is broken in half. There's only part of it, partial nicotine receptor agonist. And Chantix causes vivid dreams. So he's kind of asleep right here and he's dreaming, and it's very wild, very vivid. And it can cause neuropsych effects. So agitation, hallucination. You can see he's got those freaky hallucinogenic eyes. And then also suicidal ideation. The other smoking cessation drug is this bupropion. So these two people, they're at the mall. They see this cool photo booth and they're like, oh, sweet, man, we're going to take some photos. Let's get some props. So they have their little photo booth props with them. Booth props for bupropion. Propion. Unfortunately, though, they are smoking some dope and the booth is closed because they're like, we don't like potheads. And that is because bupropian's mechanism of action is that it is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor in the frontal lobe. So the photo booth or the brain is not going to allow this dopamine to go into the booth. It's going to inhibit its reuptake, if that makes sense. Adverse effects are that it lowers the seizure threshold. So that's what these little wonky lines here. This guy might have a seizure. It doesn't cause seizures unless you have an underlying condition. And then also insomnia. This dude looks like he's been awake for like way too long. He's super strung out. Next, we'll talk about some drugs for pulmonary fibrosis. So we have nintedanib and pirfenidone. So this is Princess Peach, and she has some perfume, and she and Bowser got in a fight, and she won, surprisingly, because I don't know how that happens, because Princess Peach is kind of a ditz. But these are both Nintendo characters, so that'll help you remember Nintendanib. But we'll start with Princess Peach here. So she's holding perfume for pirfenidone. The mechanism of action is unknown, but it does have anti-fibrotic and anti-inflammatory effects. So anti-fibrotic, the fibers of her dress here got all worn and tattered while she was fighting Bowser. So the fiber is no longer intact. It's anti-fibrotic. And Bowser normally shoots like flaming fireballs. Well, she's anti-inflammatory, so she just kind of took his flame away and said, "Screw you, Bowser." Adverse effects are rash, which is not in the picture, I don't think. I should. I always forget to draw that. Anyways, nausea, diarrhea, and hepatotoxicity. You can see her liver. Nintedanib is a TKI, a tyrosine kinase inhibitor. And the way I always think of this is I think TKI sounds like TKO, like the knockout. And Bowser got knocked out here. So TKI. And it slows down fibroblast production. Well, like I said, Bowser likes to send his little flaming fire blasts out into to fight people. And because he was knocked out, his fibroblastic powers were slowed down. Adverse effects are nausea and diarrhea. So nausea is not shown, but diarrhea, they both have that. And now I'm going to talk about some drugs for TB. So this is a big scene here, but it takes place at an ice rink at night. But I'm going to start over here on the left. So we have a tree with bees. So a tree with bees for TB drugs. And a fun little mnemonic to help you remember all the different TB drugs is RIPE. So R stands for rifampin. I stands for isoniazid or isoniazid. P for pyrazinamide, and E for ethambutol. So this tree with bees has a bunch of ripe fruit in it. What type of fruit are these? I have no idea, but they're ripe. Okay. So I will actually start with isoniazid because that's like kind of the main thing that's going on in this picture. These people are ice skating at night. So ice skating, ice at night, isoniazid, ice skating at night. And if you're looking at this rink here, the wall is not intact. It's got all these holes in it. And that's because isoniazid inhibits cell wall synthesis. Adverse effects are shown along the boards here. So we have neuropathy, central nerve system problems, hepatotoxicity, bone marrow toxicity, and GI effects. Going back to rifampin, we have this dude here holding a rifle for rifampin. And he is aiming it at this chick over here who's transcribing the game. This lady, she's watching the game, she's got her headset on, she's talking, and it's like taking record of everything that's going on. She's transcribing it. And that is to demonstrate that rifampin inhibits RNA polymerase, which blocks RNA transcription. So if this dude shot her with his rifle, it's going to inhibit RNA transcription. Adverse effects are GI, increased LFTs. So again, LFTs lift, he's lifting the rifle. And then this is going to cause all your secretions to become a red-orange color. That's why he's red. That's why the fruit's red. So it's pretty weird because if you're like crying, you're going to have red tears. So that's super weird. So we've covered rifampin and isoniazid. So next is pyrazinamide. So just in the background here, we have some mountains or some things that look like they could be pyramids, pyramid for pyrazinamide. And we don't know the mechanism of action, but there are two side effects, and that is GI and hepatotoxicity. And then our last drug for TB is ethambutol or ethambutol. And so this construction worker here, he is eating a ham sandwich, and that is interfering with his construction. Because ethambutol interferes with cell wall construction. Look at that. Causes increased LFTs. He's lifting his ham sandwich. Optic neuritis and peripheral neuritis, and also GI effects. So just to kind of sum it up, all of these have GI effects. Most of them have some sort of hepatotoxicity or increased LFTs. So those are good to remember. Now I'm gonna skip to some antivirals, and I'm not gonna lie, these are terrible pictures. I don't like them, but what I got. So antivirals, it's mentioned, I'm actually gonna start right here. There's a couple that are mentioned for prevention of influenza. There's no mechanism of action or adverse effects given, just the names of them, and that is trivalent and quadrivalent. And so I just put these rocks here. There's three rocks for trivalent, and then there's four here for quadrivalent, and they are situated along a Zen river for zanamivir. Now, zanamivir, it just says that it's an inhaler, so I think it's still an antiviral. The only two for prevention were just these two. Again, I don't have a mechanism of action or any adverse effects, so that's great. But just know the names of those, I guess. Then we have oseltamivir. So I'm like, oh, look, there's salt. Oseltamivir. And there's a normal sized one. And then there's a little mini sized one, a little mini shaker for neuraminidase. Inhibits neuraminidase. And adverse effects, so I have listed here confusion and delirium, but in our notes for this module, it says skin reactions and neuropsych effects. So that's what confusion and delirium is, but also add skin reaction to that. Then we have Balaxavir, and I have a hay bale with a ghost coming out of the end of it. And that is because originally we were told that the mechanism of action is that it inhibits endonucleases. So first of all, it's a hay bale for Balaxavir, and the ghost is coming out of the end for endonuclease. However, in this module, in this PowerPoint, it says that it is a viral polymerase inhibitor. Again, adverse effects, as stated in the PowerPoint, are hypersensitivity and neuropsych effects. Now, one fun thing about Balaxavir is that the brand name is Xfluza, and I always think, well, if you're around a bunch of bales of hay and it's super dusty, you're gonna go Xfluza. You're gonna sneeze and say that. Oh, okay. And then one more is Permavir or Peramavir. Anyways, this chick is getting a perm, and she's getting it with these little mini viruses. Again, mini viruses, because it is a viral neuraminidase inhibitor. Adverse effects are diarrhea, increased LFTs. The lady who is doing her perm has to lift her arms up. She has a skin reaction, neutropenia, and then neuropsych effects such as behavioral changes and hallucinations. So I did not mean for her to look like she's a demon. I just trying to show that she's hallucinating. But I suppose if you're giving someone a perm with little mini viruses, you're pretty evil. Next, we will go over some antifungals, specifically the azoles. So biggest one here is fluconazole. So it's just a fungus with a thermometer because he has the flu. And he's holding the Canadian flag because it treats candida. And then we have itraconazole. So this is a mushroom that looks like Cousin It from the Addams family. It's got a bunch of hair for itraconazole. And then we have two new ones that we did not learn before, and that is voriconazole and posaconazole. And so what's going on here is the mechanism of action for all of these is that they inhibit fungal cytochrome P450. P. This fungus is peeing on this other fungus, and he has to defend himself. He has to defend himself from the pee because the brand name of voriconazole is Defend. And then posaconazole, she is posing for a selfie. And the adverse effects of all of these are liver dysfunction. So the top of this is sort of shaped like a liver. And nausea. This one looks like he's a little bit nauseous. Also, just pro tips. Voriconazole is for aspergillus. So is prosaconazole. But voriconazole is like also used for any fungus, sorry, any drugs, other drugs that are resistant to, I don't know what I'm trying to say, candida resistant to fluconazole. Okay, so voriconazole can also treat candida if fluconazole doesn't work. A couple other antifungals that are mentioned is caspofungin. So here we have Casper the Friendly Ghost. Casper, caspofungin. And this one inhibits fungal wall synthesis. So this is a wall back here and it's got some fungi on it, a fungal wall. Now we don't have to know anadulafungin and mycofungin for this module, but I just want to kind of, I mean, the adverse effects are in this picture, so I'm just going to mention what's going on. In case you don't know, a doula is someone who helps with like the birthing process. So that's what's going on here. But anyways, the adverse effects for all of these drugs is hypokalemia. That's why I have a K here. Hypomagnesium, nausea. She looks like she's going to throw up. Infusion reactions, increased LFTs, and then also coagulopathy and thrombocytopenia. And then the other antifungal mentioned is amphotericin B. And so for this, amphotericin, I think an amphibian, and I chose to draw a polywog or a tadpole because amphotericin is a polyene. That's like the class of drugs. It's polyene, polywog, amphibian, and amphotericin B binds to sterols in the fungal cell membrane. So this is a set of stairs, and he's binding to it. Adverse effects are again hypokalemia, hypomagnesium, and hyponatremia. Also, nephrotoxicity and infusion reactions. So remember, this has a ton of really bad side effects, so it's only reserved for the worst fungal infections. So now I'm going to go back and talk about pulmonary hypertension. So there are three drugs for pulmonary hypertension, but this is the only one that is a PDE5 inhibitor. So the drug name is sildenafil, and I think sliding down a hill, sildenafil. And this, you're going to learn a new bird name today. So this is called a crested guan. It's just a type of bird that lives in Costa Rica. So guan, and he's riding a bicycle because the mechanism of action of sildenafil is that it increases cyclic guanosine monophosphate, or cGMP, and that causes smooth muscle relaxation. Like I said, it is a PDE5 inhibitor, so I have 5 hills that he is sliding down. And if it might help to think, because it causes smooth muscle relaxation. Well, the hill that he's on is really smooth, but he's about to hit a little bumpy patch. Adverse effects are headache, and hypotension is not shown. But pretty much anytime you relax smooth muscle, you're gonna get hypotension because it's gonna like dilate a bunch of things. The other drugs for pulmonary hypertension are bosentan and ipratropium. isoprostanol. So we have a bison that is tan colored for boson tan. And the mechanism of action is that it is an endothelin 1 or ET1 receptor antagonist, which results in vasodilation. So, of course, I'm going to draw ET. He's like, ET, phone home. I'm going to touch the bison that is tan. And that was a really bad representation. But, anyways, vasodilation. Again, I always show it as like a river or water because as it's coming towards you, it's getting bigger, it's dilating. And adverse effects are hepatotoxicity. You can see his liver. And all of this, so the bison on all this picture, it's taking place in the land that flows. It's just a very big, open, flowy field. And that's because epoprostenol brand name is Flowland, the land that flows. And this one is a prostacyclin analog. It also causes vasodilation, but cyclin, I just have Elliot from the movie E.T. Obviously, E.T.'s not in the basket because he's over here. Anyways, so he's just cyclin to help you remember prostacyclin analog. We have a porta potty over here for, or outhouse for flushing, even though outhouses don't flush. It's best I could come up with. And then jaw pain. So it's just an old dried up jawbone. And then I'm going to, we'll cover this one, talk about mucolytics and expectorants. So this one is acetylcysteine, also known as mucomist. And so we have a mummy in the mist. So here's our mummy and here's our mist, and he's breaking out of his tomb because mucomist, the mechanism of action is that it breaks open disulfide bonds in the respiratory and GI secretions. Anyway, yeah, it's gonna make your secretions less thick. But anyways, mummy, he's coming out of here. He's breaking open his tomb and he's gonna puke. And also he stinks because he's a dead body. And so adverse effects are nausea, vomiting. He's malodorous, like he smells. And then bronchospasm is drawn on his fancy little golden tomb here. We just have like the lungs and their squiggly lines around them to show bronchospasm. And then talking about some other drugs that are mucolytics and expectorants. So these are drawings from our heat module, and I hate them. They're not very good either, but just go with it. So we have guaifenesin, so a iguana for guaifenesin. And this is going to decrease the volume and viscosity of secretions. So it makes your snot more liquidy so you can cough it up better, basically. Adverse effects are nausea and vomiting or GI effects. And we have our cough suppressants. And so we have dextromethorphan, fan. And so this is Dexter. He's some cartoon that I've never watched. And I have this whole mechanism of action here. That was from our heat module, but for this, all he wrote was that it inhibits the cough reflex in the medulla. And that's a heck of a lot easier to remember. Adverse effects are hallucinations, confusion, agitation, and shivering. So some of those are right. And then another drug that is in our PowerPoint, it's kind of not shown. It's a combination of codeine and hydrocodone. So I have codeine here, I have hydrocodone here, and they're shown by like these coding, like computer coding, 101. Yeah, you get it. And then hydrocodone, it's like water plus codeine. Anyways, these are all opioid analgesics that inhibit the cough reflex, and the medulla. And their adverse effects are sedation, so like we have a seed, abuse potential, so an apple, I think, yeah, apple for abuse potential, and then constipation. So just, oh, remember those. And then the last one that's a cough suppressant is benzonatate. So I have the Mercedes Benz symbol. This one is a local anesthetic. So this was my symbol for local because it's like that thing that's on maps that's like your little locator thing and anesthetic. And again, it just suppresses your cough reflex. Adverse effects are hypersensitivity reactions. And so now I'm going to talk about drugs for hiccups or high coughs as it is in the PowerPoint. And there are 4 drugs in this category, but only 3 of them are drawn. And so before I get into the ones that are drawn, I'm going to talk about the one that I didn't draw, which is Regland. And if you remember, that was from our heat module, and it was Ronald Reagan smoking a doobie because Reglan also, so that's Reglan is the brand name, metoclopramide is the generic, but Reglan blocks dopamine and serotonin receptors and augments the effect of acetylcholine in the GI tissue. So remember, Ronald Reagan, he's smoking a doobie, and Ronald Reagan gets diarrhea because it augments acetylcholine. And it says here adverse effects are EPS and sedation. I don't know what EPS is. That's okay. So now looking at the ones I do have drawn, we also have carbamazepine, chlorpromazine or thorazine, and valproic acid. So we'll start with carbamazepine. We have a maze made out of carbs, chunk of bread. And it's one of those mazes that are on cereal boxes where you have to figure out how to get through there. And the mechanism of action is that it reduces the activity of sodium channels. So within this maze, I have a little reduce symbol, sodium. Adverse effects are sedation. So we have a seed for sedation and GI effects. So if you make it through the maze, you get to smash a seed with Thor's hammer. Why? I don't know. But this is Thor's hammer, and it's a dopamine 2 antagonist in the central nervous system. So there's 2 dope leaves that you get to smash. And the adverse effects are sedation and then this EPS thing again, extrapyramidal symptoms. Then we have valproic acid, so a vulture for valproic acid. And he's digging in the garbage, looking for some food. Garbage for GABA. It increases your GABA activity. And adverse effects are GI. And the last but not least are our drugs for cystic fibrosis. So this is Dornase alpha and avacaftor, also known as Calideco, or as I like to say, California decor. So we have a living room that has some California decor in it. Well, and to get to the room, you gotta walk through a door, Dornase alpha. So this door has a nose on it with some mucus coming out and a DNA symbol because Dornase alpha digests DNA in mucus. Remember, cystic fibrosis patients have like way too much mucus, so this is going to kind of help break it down. Adverse effects are cough and chest pain. And then I have a Caftor. Its mechanism of action is that it is for selected genetic mutations and it is a CFTR modulator. CFTR stands for cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductase, I think conductance regulator, whatever. CFTR modulator. It's it's really far-fetched, but to help you remember this, modulator, this is a modern looking room, and it's a California room. So C, California. F, there's a fern in here. T, there's a tree. And R, it's a room, a modern room. CFTR modulator. Adverse effects are increased liver enzymes, liver there, and GI effects. And so, my friends, that is all of the pulmonary drugs. Thank you for watching.